Well, the range of options include everything from nothing to 136 years in jail. A federal president cannot pardon a state law conviction. So he's not going to be imprisoned. He's not going to be confined to his home prior to the November election. That's just not going to happen.
Donald Trump is extremely rich. He's extremely powerful. He's extremely popular. He was the president of the United States, and he could be the next president of the United States. But before then, he could well find himself being forced to pick up garbage off the streets of New York City. Seriously. Or he could find himself in jail. Trump was convicted of secretly using money from one of his businesses to buy the silence of a woman he's alleged to have had sex with. So in the eyes of the court, he's a criminal. The question now is how the court will punish him, if it will punish him at all. So the drama in court will continue, maybe for a very long time. Are you sick of it? Are you entertained? Are you intrigued? Are you angry that the former president is being treated this way, the way many of his supporters are? Well, a lot of us are just wondering if Trump really is in trouble this time. Rich Schoenstein's been following the case and joins us now. What are the range of options? What's he facing now that he's been convicted?
Well, the range of options include everything from nothing to theoretically, and I only say this theoretically, 136 years in jail. Because really each count has a 4-year maximum. So if someone was going to punish him on each count by 4 years, 34 times 4 is, I think, 136 years. Nobody thinks that's happening. The most anybody thinks would happen would be 4 years, because you would run all of these convictions concurrently. So up to 4 years in jail. Nobody thinks he's going to jail for 4 years. I don't think he's going to jail. There's a sentencing hearing on July 11th. There's going to be a report to the judge prior to that, as there is in this case, these kind of cases, a pre-sentencing report, and then it's at the discretion of the judge. I don't see him sending the ex-president actually to jail.
The judge has a lot of power here, but Trump was president. He will be president again, potentially. Now, as president, he has certain kinds of powers over the federal court system, including the power to pardon. This is a state court. So could he pardon himself? And if he can't, could someone else get him out of this?
So he can't pardon himself. Let's assume he's president. A federal president cannot pardon a state law conviction. He cannot do that as a matter of law. Could he persuade a New York governor to pardon him if he was president? That is something he could try. He could try to get the New York governor to issue a pardon on one theory or another. And remember, he has appeals, right? He's got at least 2 rounds of potential appeals to try to get the conviction itself overturned and to try to get any sentence that might be imposed overturned.
Let me just stick with the sentencing, though, for the time being. The law is supposed to treat everybody equally, but when it comes to being sentenced for a crime, habitual criminals tend to be treated differently than first-time offenders. Violent criminals are treated differently than nonviolent criminals. Young criminals, unemployed criminals are treated differently than older people who have a good, steady job. So when you take all this into account, is the judge going to see Trump as someone who really deserves leniency? And if he does, are people going to think Trump got away with it again?
You left out minority criminals are statistically treated much worse than non-minority criminals. So, but let's look at this case. You know, this is a non-violent offense, right? This is a first-time conviction. These are the things in Trump's favor. He's a non-violent first-time offender. It's a unique legal theory for which he's being convicted. Nobody considers him really a threat. I mean, we can actually have a debate about that, what kind of laws he might be violating, but assume no one considers it as a threat. There's not a lot of reason for putting him in prison. The best reason I would cite if I was the judge is that he's violated the court order repeatedly during the trial. He violated a court order at least 10 times, that gag order, and now he's been convicted of 34 counts. You could certainly justify jail time if you wanted to. I just don't see the judge doing it.
So if it is something short of jail time, he's got an important job. He's going to be running for president. He has been, and he could be elected president in the course of whatever the judge decides. How much will that weigh on the judge's ruling? I mean, whether it's picking up garbage in New York City or being potentially subject to house arrest, he's kind of got big responsibilities for the country that might trump, as they say, anything that the state of New York wants to do to him, doesn't he?
Yeah, I don't see anybody limiting his ability to campaign. I don't see anybody limiting his ability to travel and campaign. I don't think the judge would want to do that. And even if the judge did, I bet the penalty would be stayed pending appeal. And the appeal process would not be concluded before the election. So he's not going to be imprisoned. He's not going to be confined to his home prior to the November election. That's just not going to happen.
Okay, let's move on to the appeal then, because does he have a good chance of getting all this thrown out? Will another court second guess this judge, do you think, and decide otherwise?
He has at least a chance. I think his best chance is on the theory of the case. Again, this was a very novel idea that these falsifying business records, which is only a misdemeanor, was turned into a felony if you believed he did it with the intent to commit another crime. And the prosecution invoked tax laws and invoked federal election laws as other crimes he may have been intending to violate when he falsified the business records. That's a very unique merger of state and federal law. I don't believe there's really precedent for it. I believe it is rightful under the laws as written, but certainly is subject to interpretation. That's his best argument. And then he's got a whole host of other arguments based on the trial itself that I don't think are particularly persuasive.
Now, you make an important distinction there. I just want to bring people in who didn't go to law school in the United States. In the United States, a misdemeanor is regarded as a fairly, a crime, but not a particularly serious one. You don't generally go to jail for anything more than a year, even if you're convicted. A felony makes you a serious criminal. And so this case really hinges in part on the fact that the prosecutors said he's really guilty of misdemeanors, but those misdemeanors got turned into felonies. That's what people, I think, are scratching their heads about. How far could this go? How long could this take to get resolved?
So he's going to apparently wait for sentencing to file an appeal. He doesn't have to, by the way. He could appeal right now. He could be arguing to an appellate court as early as September, but I don't think that's their strategy. I think they're going to wait for a sentence. They're going to file an appeal to the appellate division. That's the first level appellate court in New York, can take up to a year by the time that you file all the briefs, go before the court for argument, and get a decision. And then after that appeal, he has the right, if he loses, to seek a further appeal to what we call the Court of Appeals. That's the highest court in the state of New York. He would have to get permission to appeal to the Court of Appeals, but it seems to me like he'd have a pretty good shot at getting permission. That could take another year and a half. So you're talking about an appeal process that could easily run into 2026 or even further.
How about the Supreme Court? Could it go that high?
I don't see a direct avenue to go to the Supreme Court in this case. This is all New York law. He has been convicted under New York laws, and it is a matter for the New York courts. I know a lot of people say, go to the Supreme Court, but you can't just take a state case to the Supreme Court, again, without getting permission and without having a reason under the United States Constitution for going to the Supreme Court. I don't really see that here. Remember, he wasn't president when these crimes were allegedly committed. So this is not about something he did while he was president. This is about stuff he did before he was president. I don't know that there's a basis for the Supreme Court to get involved.
So we would assume, on the basis of what you're describing, that whatever punishment the court orders is going to have to wait until his appeals are resolved. So here's my question to you. He's been through this. It has riled up his supporters. It has gotten him millions of dollars in new campaign contributions. It has given him another grievance that he can bring to the country and say, I'm a victim and the government is arrayed against me the same way it's arrayed against you. And he can do this all very successfully right into the White House. So here's my question. No matter what happens, does Donald Trump end up winning?
Well, that remains to be seen in November. You know, he's very good at whatever happens, I turn it to my advantage, right? There's no such thing as bad publicity. If I get bad publicity, I use that. I go back to my supporters. I mean, imagine you've been convicted of 34 felonies and you turn that into a plea for people to send you money. And it works. And it works. He is a master at doing that. But there are signs that these convictions have turned off some voters. There are signs that it may have affected the polls. And there is a feeling that all of these legal entanglements are maybe pushing away some of the support he has. So how that plays out is yet to be determined. We just started June. We're a long way to November, my friend. We're a long way to November.
I'm just curious about one last thing. I think people out there, and please share your thoughts in the comment box. Everyone's exhausted by this. Is the legal system exhausted by Donald Trump? Is he just making everybody tired every day? He keeps showing up in court, keeps hiring more lawyers, keeps the judges and the court system busy.
Yeah, you have to understand, Donald Trump has been a consumer of the courts of the United States for decades. He used the United States courts, in particular the courts in New York, aggressively as a businessman to get out of paying debts he owed, to put companies in bankruptcy so he could avoid being on the hook for money, to cut people off. He used the courts to his advantage for years and years and years. And lately, it's turned a little bit. He had something like 50 cases alleging election fraud that were all rejected. He hasn't suffered any bad consequences. He lost a $500 million judgment in a New York civil fraud trial. He lost more money in a defamation trial against E. Jean Carroll. And now he's lost this 34-count criminal conviction. So he's not doing as well in the courts, where really for decades he did very well. Is the court system exhausted? No, it'll handle it one case at a time. We have the best judges and the best juries in all the world right here in New York City, and they will handle whatever comes their way.
Rich Schoenstein, thanks so much for this.